So it's 10 sharp, and let's go ahead and dive in. We'll let people trickle in as they come, and they can join us and catch up with the conversation. So first of all, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us today for this community office hours. We have nearly 30 chapters signed up for this call, so I expect people to kind of continue to scroll to roll in and join us, which is super exciting. So just thank you for taking time out of your day, whatever time of day it is and wherever you are in the world, to participate in this conversation. There's three things that we really want you to do with this and all community office hours. The first is if you can just listen intently. You're here for a specific reason, I'm sure, to serve your community and your speakers better. We want you, but also to share your experiences, your concerns, your success stories. Secondly, so to contribute. And the third is that we really want this to be the spark of the conversation. So we want this conversation to keep going. There's a speakers channel on the worldwide Slack that we'll send a link to alongside the video after the call. And if you don't have access to the Slack, or if you can't access it or get on for any reason, you can just email the community team and we'll make sure to get you on there. So hopefully if this spurs ideas or conversations that you want to have with the community, you connect with someone else's idea, please feel free to reach out to each other directly on the worldwide Slack, or spark a conversation or ask a question in the channel. And that's where we'll continue the thread afterwards.
All right. So as Kyle said, just as a heads up, we're so glad you're all here with us. And as we go through this community office hour, we appreciate your presence, and also making sure if you're not the one speaking, just to keep an eye that you keep your microphone on mute. And this call is being recorded, and you're welcome to and encouraged to share it with your team afterwards. And after we hang up, we encourage you to keep the conversation going in Slack in the speakers channel.
So the format of this call is two parts, or three parts really. We're gonna dive in and have conversations with two chapters. The first person we're gonna speak with is Lorena Garcia-Giron from Montreal chapter. Lorena, I hope I pronounced all of your names correctly. Apologies if I didn't. And Lorena is the content specialist and speaker recruiter and long-time CreativeMornings Montreal team member, having played various roles. And she's going to walk us through a bit of the process of how she prepares speakers to take the stage in Montreal. So we're going to do that for about 15 minutes. And we'll set aside a few minutes for very specific questions from you for Lorena. And then in the next segment, we're going to talk to Drew Neiser, who's the longtime host of our Minneapolis chapter. And he's going to talk us, we're going to interview him and talk to him about a bit about what he does to prepare his speakers to take the stage. And hopefully that sparks some ideas and further questions. And then in the second half hour, we're going to just take time for all of you. I took your line, sorry. Okay. So we'll take the second half hour to kind of dive into your outstanding questions and anything that hasn't been covered yet that you want addressed, and cover that.
And yeah, as people are talking, you're welcome to go ahead and type your questions into the chat, just in case you are worried they float out of your head. So we can refer back to there during the Q&A part.
So the format is, while we're talking to Lorena and Drew, if you can hold your questions until we finish and have question time for each of them. And if it's a broader or unrelated question, you can put that in the chat or save it for the broader conversation in the second half. All right. Are we ready to dive in?
I'm ready.
The thumbs up all across the screens. Yeah. Oh, global thumbs up. Amazing. Okay. Lorena, thank you so much for joining us, for waking up early and joining us and taking time out of your day.
Yeah, no problem.
We'd love for you to walk us through a bit about how you've been preparing speakers to take the stage in Montreal. So I'll just hand it over to you because I know you've prepared some slides.
Yep. Thanks. So hi, everyone. I'm just going to put the slides that I prepared. Can you hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, great. So my name is Lorena Garcia-Giron. I'm originally from Mexico, but I've been living in Montreal for 13 years now. And hold on. Sorry, there. So I'm a graphic designer. I have an interdisciplinary design studio with my brother, who's an industrial designer, and we do mostly branding and product design. I joined Creative Mornings since March 2017. I started out as an art director, and I would do the posters and any design needs. And then while doing the posters for the conference, I realized that the brief was not necessarily very clear from the person that was preparing the speakers, because she didn't have enough time or whatever. So I asked if I could join in on the meetings, and she said yes, that she actually needed help. And then she quit the next month. So it was like a great first experience. And then I had to sort of go with my gut as to how to do the coaching. But it was a very great opportunity. So what I'm going to share with you, it's pretty much my own experience and how I built it to be, with the background of what was left before this person quit the team. So recruiting. The way we recruit speakers is we get together as a team. We look at the themes for the next 6 months up to a year, and then we have a Trello board where everyone in the team is welcome to put leads, and they can put to which theme they think there would be a good fit, or they can simply just write down the information, and we'll contact them. Also, I recruit people mainly from daycare because I'm a mom, and it might sound funny, but like 3 of our really good speakers came from my son's daycare. From the playground, I talk to people. My butcher has like a very particular business plan, so I took his card, and he will probably be one of our speakers. Coffee shops, networking events. I'm always talking about Creative Mornings, and I'm always on the lookout for who has something interesting to share. And then, you know, sky's the limit. Like when we get together, we're like, who do we see for this theme? And sometimes they are, you know, actors or musicians that are very well known, or like very well known people. And we try to see who would know someone who would know someone. It doesn't always happen, but, you know, be open to that. And then the first approach is normally by email. So we contact them in advance to make sure that they are willing and available, mostly 1 or 2 months in advance. And during that first email, we sort of explain the formula and the kind of conference that we're looking for, so that we know that we're in the same page. So what I say to the potential speakers is that this is not a TED Talk. This is not a business talk either. We're looking for something that's very personal, authentic, and inspiring. And it's also unique because we will work together to come up with a conference specifically tailored for our event, what we're going to create together. And it's meant to be a transformative experience. Now, not all speakers are the same level of public speakers or have the same level of experience. And in that case, you know, like there could be some resistance that I will get to in a minute. So when they say yes, I would like to be a speaker, we send them another email telling them the interpretation of the theme and why we think it's a good fit with them. We also send them 3 conferences that we find that are outstanding from our chapter, and why we think they are outstanding. So we say, like, this one made us laugh, it made us cry, and it inspired us. This one was from one speaker that had given 500 conferences on the same theme, and then we worked with her together to create a conference that she had never given before from another angle, and it was just amazing. So that the person gets a feel again of what we're looking for. We have encountered people that say, well, I am a professional public speaker, I have a lot of experience, like just trust me and let me take the stage. And it's a tough call, but sometimes a no is necessary. And I would tell you to not be afraid to turn down a potential speaker, because if they aren't willing to embark on the experience we offer them through our process of being one of our speakers, then it's not the right fit. And I've encountered that situation 2 or 3 times, and it has been a tough call. But I would say stay true to the CM values and trust your gut. So what happened the first time is that I went to the host, and the host just said, you know, I trust you and it's your call. And I went back to, what do I love about Creative Mornings? And that was authenticity and its uniqueness. And I was like, that cannot be achieved if this person is just repeating something that he or she has already created before. So don't be afraid, and don't be afraid to ask them to do a run through with you. You are in a position of helping them achieve something better to share with our community. And then we go up to coaching. We meet twice. Our event is at the end of the month. So normally it's either at the end of the previous month or at the beginning of the month, and then in the middle of the month for an hour and a half. In the first meeting, what we do is we dig deep. We go beyond what the speaker thinks he or she's going to say. They always come up to us telling, you know, what they're sort of thinking of saying, and it's a good start. But what we do is we talk about the theme, their personal and professional experiences in relationship to it, and anything else that pops up. It's important that we earn their trust so that they can open up and be authentic and generous. So what I do is I normally become vulnerable with them so that they are comfortable being vulnerable with me and sharing things that otherwise they would not share. Depending on the speakers, I have encountered some that have a very big barrier or shield, and it's tough to go around that. But we do get around that. And once we do, then you can find like the magic, right? So the best conferences turn out to be about something the person didn't even know he or she was going to address. And that I think that's key for our community and for our events to be so magical and special. While the coaching is going on for the first meeting, what I do is I take a lot of notes. I don't interrupt the person. And then I go back to the person and I ask him or her some questions. And then when I get back home, I transcribe them, I take pictures, and I send them to them. So this is like just a reference for them to build upon. It doesn't necessarily have an order to it, but it has every aspect that came out during our first meeting. And so far, it has been very helpful for the speakers. Then we meet again about 2 weeks later for another hour and a half. And in that second meeting, they come with their first draft of what they want to say. And then we deconstruct. We go over the narrative and we piece together in a different order what the speaker will say. We edit, we paste, we move around the story, the contents and the visuals when they have, until we find what makes the best version of what can be said. And this is important because it's not necessarily in chronological order. That can be very boring. So sometimes it's not 1, 2, 3, 4. It's going to be 4, 2, 1, 3. And this makes for a more interesting and conveying talk. And depending on the level of experience of the speaker, sometimes we need to practice with them. Others, they will practice on their own. I've had someone that on the second meeting, her draft was so good that we just practiced. So I said, you're going to be speaking outside. It was an outside event. You have to take something in your hand and pretend that it's a microphone, and you have to walk on the stage and you have to make eye contact. The first time she went through it, she was 18 minutes instead of 20. And I said, you have to talk slower. and then she would talk, and I would say, this is, you pause, you count up to 3, you turn around, you keep on talking. So it can be as technical as that, or it can be very, organic, and, you go with the flow and whatever you feel like saying. It depends on the speaker, and you will know because you have already met them previously. Also, I insist on it being 20 minutes. People often tell me it's not a lot in 20 minutes. We covered so much, and it's like, it's going to be enough, because I know that the day of the event, they will probably go over those 20 minutes. So it's good for them to practice and practice and practice to have those 20 minutes, right? And again, I take notes and I send them to them so that they can see the order that would be suggested, for their talk. And then, because I'm a graphic designer and I used to be the one doing the art direction in the team, which I still do sometimes, I talk about the keynote. Not all the speakers are able to create their own keynotes. When they do, what I say is keep it simple. Just a visual and a phrase, and no more than 10 slides. Because if it's 20 minutes, then it means that it's probably 2 minutes per slide, and that's more than enough. Some speakers say, oh, I don't need a keynote, I just want to talk to people. Not everybody is auditive. People also need a visual, because otherwise their attention will go around and they will not focus on what you're saying. So that's a shame. When they are not comfortable making their own keynote, what I do is I create it for them. And it's really like, this is an example of 3 speakers that we had for Audience Takes the Stage in 2017 in December. And I tried to find like a common ground. So in this case, the theme was context, and the line that's underneath the words in each slide is I don't know how you say this, the thread that puts them together. So as you can see, it's really like a photo and a phrase or a word, and it's more than enough. On the day of the event, make sure that your speaker shows up in advance and that you can offer them a quiet space, either to practice or just to focus, because if they start mingling, their attention and their energy might fade out before they have to deliver the talk. Almost at every event that I've coached someone, they come up to me right before, being nervous, and what I tell them is, no one knows better what you're going to talk about than you. You have practiced enough, you know your theme, so just let go of all worry and simply enjoy the experience. And I trust you. I trust that you are ready to deliver an amazing talk, and that normally does the job. Also, I wanted to say that this is the opportunity to be a speaker recruiter and coach is a very privileged one, because you get to have a relationship where people that have done amazing things come to you for help. And of course, at the beginning, because of the circumstances in which I got to fulfill the role, I had the imposter syndrome. I was like, well, I did not study to be a coach. I haven't done this for a long time. I'm just starting. But I just faked it till I made it. And every time that I coached someone else, it got better and better, because I would learn from the past experience. And what I would say is trust your instinct. My way of coaching is very empathetic, I would say. It's really based on connecting, on being authentic, on the human contact. We normally structure the conferences with a little bit of personal background and experience, something that has to do only with the theme, and something that links both of those things. And while the relationships that spring from those encounters are very, very valuable. So if you are in the position or the role to do that for your team, you're very lucky. And what I was going to say as well is, after the event, make sure they get positive feedback right after. I usually walk up to the speaker and I say, you did an amazing job. I'm so proud of you. This was great. And then, I let them mingle with the crowd, and then I go back to them again and I say, what was your experience like? And that just strengthens the relationship with me in person, and also with the chapter. So it's something that I would suggest for you. And also, if you can, you can give them a token of your appreciation depending on what your chapter has to offer. We made last year cups, me and my brother, because we do product design and we're designers. So they're handmade, and they were, the speckles represent the community that supports the chapter and all that. And we also did magnets. So what we would do is we would give them, the speaker, a cup and a pair of magnets, and then we would write a little thank you note on the back from the team. And also, when the video of the talk is online, it's an excellent opportunity to send them an email thanking them again for being part of our community and for sharing their experience. And from time to time to just touch base with them and invite them to keep coming to our events, especially to the anniversary one. Mm-hmm. And that's it. If you have any questions, you can ask them now. But if later on you think about something, you can always reach us through our chapter or reach me directly through this contact information.
Thank you so much for that. I'd love, if anybody has a question, feel free to unmute and go ahead and ask it now, specifically for Lorena. I'd love something in the chat too. I love the part about finding multiple speakers just from her daycare for her child. And I was wondering if anybody else has like a really weird or wild place where they've discovered or found a speaker. Could you put that in the chat? I just want to see where's your most unusual speaker come from? So share that in the chat, but then the first one up, if anybody would like to ask a question, we'll limit it to just a few minutes here before we move on, but feel free to hop in.
Can I ask, what is your time frame for starting this process? Like, when do you have your first meeting? How far in advance from the event? And is that standardized, or is it just when you get the lead or when the lead comes through?
Well, as I mentioned, we normally get together to plan for 3 or 6 months in advance. We contact the speakers, I would say, at least 1 month in advance to get a confirmation that they're going to be our speakers. And then we set the meetings for the first week of the month and the third week of the month, I would say. Or if you can get more advanced than that, then it's even better.
Hi, Lorena. Thanks for sharing this morning. My question is, can you highlight a talk that's online that a speaker went through your process in an exemplary way?
Yes, of course. There was Mylène Paquette for Restart. And when, Kyle asked me, like, what do you do when you have like very well-known people and if they have pushback? This woman went across the Atlantic, with, how do you say that? Like by herself, like rowing. She rowed across the Atlantic. She is known for that. She has given over 500 conferences in the past 5 years about that. And we chose her for Restart because she wanted to turn away from being known only for that. She was so humble. Like, I went to the first meeting and she was like, just help me build something new, right? And through the process, if you see the talk, there's a slide where you will see little points, and she's explaining that that route, she should have done it in like, I don't know, several hours, and it turned out to be several days. And when we were talking, she was showing me like technical things, and I said, you should put that slide in. And she's like, really? Like, I don't think it's interesting. And I was like, yeah. And then my graphic design side came up, and I was like, we're just going to zoom in, and it's going to really illustrate, how uncertainty and like things that you didn't plan for can happen, and how that influenced your perspective on what you were living. So she included that in her talk, and it made a difference. Also, she was complaining about people always asking her, like, but how do you pee? You know, how do you go to the bathroom? And we were laughing about it. And then we were like, well, you should talk about that then, you know? And she did. She said, when someone goes to space, you don't ask them, how do you pee and how do you poop, right? They are astronauts. They are doing something amazing. So can we get beyond that conversation? And what she addressed was the environment. And she said, well, being out in the sea, I saw so much pollution. And I think that it makes absolutely no sense that we use drinkable water to in our bathrooms, you know, in our toilets. Like, how about we consider like a dry, compostable toilet for the future? So those things she had never talked about before. And she had given 500 conferences, and she had hired someone to build those conferences. And as we all know, you know, Creative Mornings is volunteer. So she got all this for free in exchange for her, you know, giving the talk. And it was very, very valuable to her. So that's one of the talks, but it's in French. If you want one that's in English, you could go see Scott Mitchell on Surreal. Scott Mitchell, he was a coach and also an animator, an animation director. And we got a link between those two, how coaching for snowboarding and gymnastics and then animation blended in together. He was so anxious, so anxious. On our second meeting, he said, you have no idea, just coming here, the anxiety that I was going through. And I treated him as an athlete. So the day of the event, he delivered such a good talk. Like, you can go and see it. It was January of 2019 on Surreal. So those are some examples of how, you know, we were able to accomplish something great with people that were willing to be part of the process.
Thank you so much, Lorena, for sharing. I'm gonna cut us off there, but Lorena, I'm sure, is available on the worldwide Slack if you have a direct follow-up, right?
Yeah.
And I'll have her share those talks with us so we can put them in the follow-up. So we'll send you a link to check out those talks afterwards. So thank you, Lorena, so much. Thank you for that walkthrough. I think what I love particularly about the process is how you're really providing the support for someone who doesn't have any speaking experience to walk them through it. In a way, you're sort of offering a fellowship to someone who doesn't have that speaking experience but has done the work, and allowing them to take the stage, which I think is really great. And I think it's a perfect segue to our next speaker, or next person, who's Drew, our longtime host from Minneapolis, who is out of his car. He's entered his office and he's gone straight to a phone room to do non-work related things. So that's great. We appreciate that. I appreciate you joining us, Drew. So welcome. I guess, do you want to start by telling us a bit about yourself and a bit about your process for speakers at Creative Mornings Minneapolis?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. I feel like I just went to school with Lorena. I mean, seriously, she had slides. It was so organized. I need those slides, by the way, because I need to be more organized. So I've been the host here in Minneapolis which is in Minnesota, if you don't know, for a couple years. Been on the team for most of the history of our 6 years. And I actually started, it's too long of a story, but I started as a speaker, a last minute speaker. I got pulled in like 2 weeks before one of our first events. Someone dropped out. So I have that at least going for me, usually, with the empathy. And I spoke right after a huge hip hop artist from Minneapolis. So it was like kind of a like no pressure situation, but I can always use that with my coaching with speakers to have a little bit of sympathy. We had the mayor of Minneapolis speak this year, and the guy after was like, "Oh, why'd you put me after the mayor?" And I was like, "I was after this artist." So you're good. Our process in Minneapolis is quite similar to how Lorena's doing it. So I'm going to try to not repeat a ton of that sort of stuff and talk about maybe more of the messiness, more of the things that we do that just don't, it's different every time is kind of the reality of it. We're all doing this as volunteers. I would love if I could have 2 meetings every single time with each of my speakers. We often do. We often try that. But the reality of it is some speakers get booked, the month before, and some get booked 8 months before. And so some of it is timing. And also a huge factor for us has been, some speakers have never spoke ever anywhere. Some speak every single night on the news or every single night in a concert. So we found that it requires each speaker requires a lot of different things. And empathy, I love that you used that word before. That it's huge, huge. It's so important for understanding what each speaker needs in the process to get them to a place where they can give the best version of their talk. So where do I start? Our speaker selection process is really, really important to us. Kind of the speaker selection and speaker coaching really often meld together. A lot of the ways that you can help prep your speakers, I think, is in just how you approach them at the very beginning. I will actually say something different than Lorena. I've found that my style, we used to reach out to people a lot to offer speaking via email. And because of especially one bad situation we found ourselves in, kind of stopped doing that. I think you can reach out to people. I mean, we do research, right? You find someone, they may even have videos up, they may look awesome. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but I'll give you the example here. We had someone who was on the news for years in many national markets, came to Minneapolis, was kind of a big deal. Please don't repeat any of this out loud if you know who this is, but by all factors, should have been a great, amazing speaker. She was charming. And I met her after having emailed her and offering her the thing, met her to coach her. And it was a very different scenario. It turned into a really tough time. I realized she maybe had some personal stress in life that would have been severely affecting her ability to focus and all this different stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on. And I think what I learned is I like to, before I offer someone a speaking date or whatever, to meet with them in person. I need a gut check. I need to go, if I'm sitting across from them having a coffee, are they engaged? Are they excited about what they're talking about? Am I leaning in? Do I want to hear more? Does the meeting run too long? All those are really good signs to me that they would be someone that would be engaging. And again, it's not that everybody has to be a crazy extrovert or, energetic, because we've had really, chill people also. But they have something that, that's something that you want to hear what they're talking about, and they believe what they're talking about. And so really, again, that's speaker selection, but that's also speaker coaching. I do the same thing as you guys do up in Montreal. I take tons of notes, a notebook out, I listen. Asking good questions is really, really important. And I'm looking for these little nuggets. I'm looking for things that visually stand out to me. This morning, just before this, I had a very short first meeting with one of our speakers, and she said, oh yeah, she's a designer. I knew I always wanted to do layout. I was in yearbook in high school, and I did this and I did that. I remember I was interviewed by our school newspaper, and they asked me, something, and she said, I had this quote, and it was, when she was really, really young, and I just had this visual of that quote in the newspaper, and that would be an amazing, image to have in her slides. People love the throwback photos of when you're a kid, at least our audience does. And so I start writing little notes like that. That would be a really, really great thing. And I try to communicate that right away and send that as a follow-up in the email so that as they're prepping, they know which stories to focus on and which nuggets really are going to resonate. So I'm rambling. That's all really important for the beginning. A couple questions I would come prepared with that have helped me out a lot in these beginning speaker prep sessions. Before we get into the nitty gritty of how, the talk is laid out, or, what the visuals are going to look like, or the outline, or even the theme, we'll get to that kind of towards the end, is I just want to hear their story. I want to hear, how did they get started in what they did? Did they always know they wanted to be a XYZ? Tell me about growing up. Tell me about, your family, if it's appropriate. And again, you have to judge, which kind of stuff is appropriate, but Creative Mornings talks are very personal too. So finding ways to tap into some of that is important. And a lot of the things you end up talking with the speaker aren't going to end up in the talk, right? Like they're just going to kind of inform, because I'm sitting there the whole time looking for those magic moments, looking for things that relate to the theme. So a couple of the other questions that have helped, I always try to ask them, tell me about the Minneapolis-St. Paul, we get 2 cities, by the way, Minneapolis-St. Paul creative community. Like when you talk about it with other people, how do you describe our creative or our art scene? Like, what is it like to you? What are we doing really, really well? Like, how are we known in the United States or the world? What are we doing really poorly as well? Like, what are you frustrated by? What do you wish we were talking about more? And there's often common themes for us. You know, it's a lot of our creative community is very siloed. You know, the theater community and the hip hop community and the graphic design community. So that's a theme. Racism has been a big theme for the last few years. Different things like that. Lots of stuff. So talking through that, I look for these moments where, you know, they're going to either give you a standard answer or they're going to give you something that you can see them kind of light up and get kind of, you know, excited. And again, a lot of what I'm doing is looking for energy and figuring out how we can channel that energy into the talk. Other questions that we've asked that really help. Yeah, and then we just kind of talk about the theme, I guess, is, you know, what does this theme mean to you? How do you connect with it? One thing that we found in the speaker selection process also as a note that might help you, I used to try to go like, the theme is end. I need to find someone that is perfect for that. And I've researched them and I know their background and I offer them that theme. We actually started offering multiple themes to people and asking them which one resonates with you. Which one, and we've gotten surprised a few times. I would have never picked this one for this person. And then as they tell why it resonates with them, it kind of starts to unfold what their talk might look like. It's pretty cool. Because then they have that personal buy-in. So we usually now just try to look for cool people and then figure out the theme rather than obsessing over the theme and having to, you know, match it. It takes a little bit of the pressure off. So, okay. So next, as we kind of go through this first meeting, I usually send them a follow-up email as well, confirming sort of the logistical things. Logistics, remember, Kyle? As well as giving them some links to additional materials as they think about their talk, right? And I can share these with y'all if that's helpful. I have some, you know, YouTube videos. I have some articles. It depends on how people like to prep. You know, some people don't need that stuff. They're very comfortable. Some people, you know, have been artists in Minneapolis for 30 years and have never been asked to speak. And so even the basics of like what good visuals look like and why simple is really important and less is important. Though I will say, Lorena, we had a speaker once do 100 slides in 20 minutes and it worked and it was not rushed and it was one of my favorite talks ever. And she was a backup speaker who said yes the Tuesday before the Friday. So like, again, it's always sort of different. And she's just an amazing person, so it worked. But I send those links, and that usually is a good way to like help people think about it and prep. So something that we do, I think that's kind of scary in a way, is I'm very, very much, I let people kind of struggle through it a little. I mean, I'll coach them, I'll ask them questions, I'll give them things to think about, but I want them to figure out what they want to say on their own in a way so that they really own it. So that's, again, yeah, a lot of the same stuff, that it's something they maybe haven't talked about before, that it's full of stories, you know, that it's going to maybe upset some people sometimes, all that, but I want them to kind of work through it. And it's cool to see how speakers kind of come at revelation on their own. Like, oh, I realized after wrestling with that theme, this is what I really want to say about it. So depending on how much time we have, there might be a good chunk of time where I'm not, you know, coaching them or talking to them or meeting with them, and that they're just on their own doing work, thinking about it. It may be a month, 2, sometimes 3. And when we come back around and try to have that second meeting, it either happens sometimes as a meeting, sometimes it happens on the phone or over, Zoom or something. I sometimes love them to walk through and give me the talk, depending if that's something they need to do. If they're a more like seasoned, they've given talks, they know what they're doing, I can tell, I will just ask for their outline sometimes. I mean, I'll say their slides, right? They'll send me their slides usually a week before, but we kind of go through the outline, talk about, what are those moments in the talk, what are the stories you're going to tell that like ladder up to this main theme of your talk. What could you leave out? What could be better? Just like Lorena, the order of things is really important too. It's not linear, isn't usually the most interesting. And so if I can help them think about like, okay, what's the opener? The opener shouldn't be like, hi, I'm Drew. I work in social media. This is what I do. Blah, blah, blah. That's boring. Could you start with a question? Could you start in the middle of a story? Could you start, so there we were, our 5th Creative Mornings event in Minneapolis ever. And we looked out the window and a construction crew had taken the entire road out and none of our attendees were there yet. That's a different story for a different time, but like, that's interesting. And now I have your attention and you want to hear the end and you want to hear like, were they able to come to the venue? I can tell the rest of the story later. And so tricks like that help speakers as well. I like what you said too about finding things that were difficult to talk about. I remember one of my classic stories for coaching was, it was way back when we had the theme ugly. I don't know if anyone remembers that, long time ago. And we had this pretty well-known Instagrammer who does a lot of design work, does stuff with Target, all this just gorgeous, perfect, well-lit Instagram feed. And she was kind of sitting down, at the coffee and like, oh, my week's crazy. I mean, you should see my home office right now. You should see my living room. It's a wreck. And I was like, you should take a photo of that and show it. And she was like super uncomfortable for a minute. She's like, okay. And she did it. And she felt really awkward during the talk doing it, but it kind of like opened up the vulnerabilities for her to connect with the audience in a way that like, they probably just expected her to show the pretty stuff and, oh, I'm a wreck sometimes, but whatever. But her doing that was like a good step in that way. And that's maybe, it was more revelatory a few years ago than it is now with living authentic and all of that. But anyways, all that to say, you can tell I don't have slides. I'm not being like rigid about it all the time because I want you guys to see that my goal when I'm coaching speakers is to not get them to say what I want them to say. It's not to get them to say it in the version that I think would work perfectly. It's to get them to tell their story the most like themselves and tell their story in the best way that's going to interest people. I have ways that in my head that I know, like if they did it this way, it would work great. I'm not going to just tell them that usually. I'm going to help them work towards that on their own by asking questions, making some suggestions, especially once the trust is there, is established, and I can kind of, say more honest things to them, like don't talk about that or do talk about that. That'll come once you get to know them a little bit more, but it's really to help them figure out how to be themselves. And I think that helps with the nervousness too. It's like some people expect like, oh, I have to be like that person. I have to be like the mayor of Minneapolis. No, you don't. You just have to be you. How do you perform best? How do you look? And every talk is going to be different. I had our speaker for September next week call me on Saturday, and he said, so I'm in New York and I'm thinking, and I have this idea. I want to do it kind of like a performance piece maybe. I want to do all these videos and I want to like talk in 3 parts, and I'm going to talk here and there's going to be a poem, there's going to be this, and then I'll do whatever. And it's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable, but then we can save this part for the Q&A. And he's going off on all these ideas. And I was like, that's super weird. And we've never done that. Let's do it. Like we've opened up in the last few years being a little bit more flexible to saying like, let's try some stuff we haven't before. We had 2 mini talks, with 10-minute talks back to back on the same theme. We've, had pairs of speakers. We've had people do a lot of different stuff that doesn't always fit the mold, but it's always them. It always kind of fits with them. So anyways, I'm kind of rambling about a lot of different stuff. I'm mostly interested in kind of opening it up. If you guys have specific questions for what I just rambled about or other things with speaker prep, again, Lorena's thing, like follow that. That's awesome. We do a lot of the same stuff if we can, if we have the time. But I wanted to fill in the gaps maybe on some stuff that, you know, is outside of the box since we covered it so well in the first part. So happy to like talk about whatever you guys want to.
Thanks so much, Drew. Really appreciate that. That's a fun walkthrough. I love the idea that the thing that stands out to me is the coffee, not even an invitation to speak, but it's an introduction, it's a conversation before an offer is ever even made. And that's really fascinating to me, just to, I think it expands the possibilities so much of, you know, it lessens the pressure, it eases the burden on you as the person who's curating the speaker series on finding the exact right person, and allows you the kind of like a wider pipeline to really fill up and find the right role in the right month for the right person. So that really stuck with me.
I mean, I just approach it as like, I'm a curious person. I love getting to know people in Minneapolis and St. Paul. I want to have coffee with you. Like, yeah, I run this Creative Mornings thing. Maybe if I have a good inkling that could be a speaker, I could say, let's explore these ideas. We're always looking for cool people. I'd love to get to know you more. But like, it takes the pressure off you too. Sometimes I've met with people and they may not know that I'm thinking of them as a speaker, but I just want to get to know them. And that takes off the pressure because then they can be themselves and they don't feel like they have to perform for me. Yeah. But also I have a little more flexibility in picking maybe and offering them like this year or next year or whatever. I mean, some of our speakers, it's taken, 2 years to get the right time for them. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much. Does anybody have a specific question for Drew about his process or what he's spoken about before we open the floor up?
I have one, if I can jump in.
Please.
Yeah, you can hear me okay? Okay, great. Hi, Drew. It's Maxine from Ottawa. I have a question. Yeah, great job, by the way. I really enjoyed everything both you and Lorena was saying. So we have a very similar process in Ottawa, but we have a big speaker coming up in January, and we've never really had somebody quite with his presence before. And I know you spoke about that experience you had was maybe a little bit negative. So I'm wondering, do you have any tips on how we could possibly approach that in a better way? Like, for example, he has an agent and we're working with the agent. And I have worked through other people in the past to get to the speaker, and that's always really tricky. So I don't know if you have tips for me or any recommendations for that.
Yeah. I mean, I've had really good experiences with big name people and really tough ones. I'll give you an example of both. And I think at the end of the day, we can dig into your situation if it helps, but I mean, it kind of depends. Like, you got to ask yourself, why are we working with this person? Hopefully they resonate with the Creative Mornings values and things like that. We had the mayor of Minneapolis this year, and I didn't speak to him at all until the event day. Like, I worked through his assistant, which was really, really tough, who also would not answer my phone calls forever or emails. And it was game time, week of. And I finally found another person and went around and whatever. And it was this was our first prep meeting, was me calling this person week of and walking through things and how Creative Mornings is different and what it should be like and stories, theme and all this. And I was hoping they're taking notes. And the person said, oh yeah, I'm going to brief the mayor today and whatever. And he's doing all these other events. Oh, and by the way, he has to leave early because he has another meeting, and all this stuff happened. Right. And I knew okay, he speaks all the time and he's a super charming dude. People like him. He's going to be okay. But what happened day of, he came up to me hi, oh, I'm so glad to be here. So charming, right? And I am almost certain he had no idea what Creative Mornings was about at that point. He had, okay, so the theme is whatever the theme, wonder. So he just kept peppering the word wonder into his talk, and he just kind of talked about whatever. It was fine. I mean, it wasn't the most brilliant talk ever. We didn't have a screen at this one because it was outdoors. So that took off some of the pressure, but he talked and he told some stories, and it was funny and engaging, and it was fine. So at the end of the day, that can happen too, and that can be fine. I've had other speakers though who speak all the time and are kind of a bigger deal, who have really opened up, and in our speaker prep sessions, they end up like telling really, really personal stories and crying and connecting and leaning in and saying like, help me to do this better. Like there's a vulnerability and like an openness to the coaching and stuff. I don't know if any of this is helping you, Maxine, but basically what I'm saying is part of it is like, if they're well known and they do this they do some sort of performing or speaking, part of it is just like, it's going to be okay. Like, even if you can't get it to go through the process exactly how you want. But you kind of have to decide which hills you're going to die on. Do they have, one thing we always try to do too, I maybe didn't mention, is I always try to have speakers come to an event before they speak. Like it helps so much if they get to see it. They get to see me on stage that I'm like this, that I'm just like casual and make people feel comfortable and stupid and silly and whatever. Like, and they see that it's not like a big like marketing thing with all these logos and pitching and whatever. Like that helps a ton, because when it hasn't, people get really confused somehow, even though we communicate it to them. They okay, so you're going to interview me on stage? Is that what we're doing? Like that kind of stuff. So anyways, all that to say, figure out which piece of it is like a non-negotiable maybe for the person. And if you decide that's like a thing that they have to do to be a speaker, like, I don't know, you could be okay with saying no. I don't know. We debated for years, like before he passed away, like if we could get Prince, would we have him as a speaker? And I know people in the music industry, and they say he's an amazing, charming person, but he's like a nightmare. He'll like shows up or doesn't show up when he wants to. He bails, he doesn't, whatever. And I thought, well, like, of course we would get him if he would say yes. We'd get Bob Dylan, we'd get whoever these famous Minnesotans are. But like, there's a certain level too. You're like, below Prince, you can't be a diva about stuff, unless you're Prince.
Unless you're Prince. Great closing thoughts. So I'd love to open it up. If anybody else has a question now, unrelated to what Lorena and Drew spoke about, if you have a burning question or reason you came on this call, or something that's completely along a different line or topic, please feel free to jump in. Related, if you've had a big ego of your own that you've dealt with in your chapter and you have a response to Maxine, please feel free to jump in with that as well.
I wanted to say something to Maxine about her situation, and I think it applies for everyone. But it's my personal point of view, but I think my chapter is on board with that. I think you have to choose your battles. And you have to ask yourself, for us, the events that we do every month are not about the speaker. They are about our community and the theme. The speaker is a way it's like a channel to share, something about Creative Mornings and the theme, but it's not the focal point. So when you have someone that is very, very well known, that it becomes about that person. So if that is what you choose, and for you it's very important to have a big name on stage, then let them have the stage the way they usually do. But I don't think that you can have both. That's just my input.
Thanks, Lorena.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, open floor. Would anybody else love to dive in? Is there a challenge you faced or a success story that you've had that you'd love to share?
I've got something to share, and I don't know how this relates to everyone else in the world, because we are a small city. We're in Asheville, and we begged our way into Creative Mornings. So I know there are limits on how many, the amount of people per city is like 500,000. We have 90,000, and we pack a big punch, but now we're starting to feel a little bit of the reasoning probably behind that advice of population, and that being, I think we're having to dig a little bit deeper for speakers that are bringing something really valuable. And we had a really good run for 2 years, but slowly the kind of, that was a good talk, started peppering in more and more. And so I was brought in as the speaker coaching liaison, and my role is to walk with the speakers through the whole event, the experience, be there for them so that they don't feel lost when they're there at the event, and then also to help them dig up something that's really valuable. But the reason why I was asking earlier, Lorena, about the time period is because I feel that if you have a speaker, when you have a speaker, their level coming in is more, I don't know if this is just my own assumptions at this point, is more important than what I can do for them as a coach. Because if we don't bring speakers, the same as you, we don't bring speakers because of who they are. We bring them to bring quality and value to our community, and it's a warm environment. But sometimes they'll come and they'll like give their pitch about what their work, and though I've told them not to. And so what we're trying to figure out now is how do you find and or prep in a way that starts to really deliver for an event, that delivers that energy, because we had like a string of, and this could just be the nature of being in a small city and having a smaller pool to bring speakers out of. But we had such a string of really, really heavy hitters, not even in name, but just in presence and in quality of content, in inspiration. And then it's just started getting a little bit bland. And so I'm wondering if there's like some special sauce that you bring that enlightens them and brings them to the talk in a way that's above their pitch and their work and all this stuff.
I'd love to open that up to anybody that has a response to that or a solution.
Hi.
Hi, Sophia.
Sophie from Montevideo here. It's so bad that I'm taking the mic right now because I was here very late, but I have something to say about what Tim just asked, so I thought I might chip in. There's another person from our team here, Matthias, and since the beginning, we've been developing a process that we do with the speakers that helps find the core message that they want to show and the way to show it. But it doesn't start with the speaker him or herself. It starts before that with picking the right speaker. So our process is we kind of do weekly meetings with our core team. Sometimes they don't happen, but we try to. And in those meetings, once in a while, we call it an explosion. It's basically a brainstorming about the theme, the monthly theme. And we use a lot of Post-its, obviously. Our core team is around 10 people. Those meetings tend to be like between 5 and 8 people. And we do this explosion of the theme in which it's basically a brainstorming. So each person has, so we put down the first Post-it with the theme and the month that's gonna be. And we first read out loud the Wikipedia of the word for everyone to like be on that mind frame. And then we do the brainstorming. Each person 3 minutes in silence on their own, 1 idea per Post-it, and anything that you relate to that concept. So each one of us on their own, like 1 Post-it, 1 idea per Post-it, encourage drawing and be in silence. No talking at this point. And then when those 3 minutes end, we put everything together, we cluster, we find what's been resonating more with the team, what we are tending to. And then we just discuss for a while, like about the theme, about what our thoughts are. Some conversations go more philosophically and some go more superficially, depending on the theme and our mood. But yeah, we discuss the theme for a while, and then everyone starts.
We have about 30 seconds left. Sorry, if you.
Sorry,
if you don't mind
I'm gonna go fast. So then we think of people that might bring something related to any part of the theme that we found, and we make a list. Our first priority, then 2 more just in case, and we contact them. So that process is very important because it goes in depth to the concepts that we're talking about, to pick the right person. And once the right person is picked, we invite them. If they say yes, we start a process that is 2 to 3 meetings with Matthias, who is here. He's a coach, and he knows a lot about, I don't know how you call it, PNL. Mati, do you know the word in English? Neurolinguistics programming?
Yes.
Is that what it is?
Yes, hello. Well, I am Matthias. I have been introduced by Sophie. I'm from Montevideo also. It is neuro-linguistic programmation.
Okay.
It kind of works with how we perceive the world in different, related to our sense, and how we construct our inner maps about that. And well, that's the answer to your question.
So the speaker.
I would love if you're able to define that word for the group. Maybe send out a link for everyone to read up more about it. That sounds like a really interesting process. And also just kind of a deep dive into, Sophia, if you're willing to go more into those meetings, the multiple meetings before the event, to share that with the group, because I think that would be very helpful and insightful as well.
Yeah. It's not much more than this. We do 2 to 3 meetings with Mati, which has this profile. Then Vale, which is the co-leader of the team with me. She has a design thinker mind, and I'm a visual thinker. So they interview the speaker, and I jot down notes with Post-its too, 1 idea per Post-it, and then we give that to them for them to reorganize them and prioritize and find like what's the main idea, and we always ask them to find the main idea that doesn't go to examples, so that is very conceptual, and then find those examples that support that idea. That's basically our process.
That's basically it. I love that. I love the participation with the Post-its and the kind of what you describe as the explosion to really, and even
a great tool
definition, because you're getting, I think you're assessing different definitions of the theme, and so you're getting different ideas. Yeah. I hate to wrap it up there, but we need to close the discussion. So
team, if you're in Slack, team, hit me up and ask whatever you want. I'm open to.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we can keep the conversation going on Slack in the speakers channel. It was fascinating to hear everyone's approach, and I'd love to hear more of them there. And as we said at the top, this conversation has been recorded. We'll get that once we have that downloaded and ready to share, we will do so. And you're welcome to share it with your team, and we'll be back next month. Do we have a topic for next month?
Not yet, no.
We'll be back next month, and we'll let you know what the theme is for the next chat.
An important last step, though, before we wrap up, is to take a group photo. So if you're willing and able, if you can turn your webcam on and give a big smile and wave to the camera, and we'll just take a photo to remember all of us by. And smile. There, got it. Nailed it. Thank you so much for all of you for participating. Please keep the conversation going in the speakers channel. Feel free to ping each other, and we'll send a follow-up email via the event, the message all attendees with a link to the video, some of the resources that were shared, and anything else that you need. Oh, as well as a survey, because we'd love to hear what your ideas are for future community office hours, and just to hear what you thought about this call. So thank you.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
All right.
Bye-bye.
See you all soon.